morning, John. Are you with us?
Good morning, David.
Yes. Hi, John. We're having some tech troubles this morning, and I didn't mean to run the intro because we thought that was the problem. But here we are. It ran automatically, and we're online. So, good morning, John. Good to see you.
Good morning, David. Good to see you, and hello to the listeners. And just acknowledge that we are sitting in Ghana country today.
Yeah. Indeed. Now, John, we're talking a little bit more about the project, but before we actually get started, I want to just share our links through to the other pages so that everyone who's interested and in our project is able to see it live. So I'm doing that now. I'm just bringing it through to Simply Splendid Productions. Of course, we're published there, and to Two Brothers Walking, and that will bring in our other communities and listeners. If you're interested, feel free to share the link out as well to your communities. Okay, and we've been talking in this series over the last couple of weeks about the multi-touch ebook project, bilingual, Kuku Yaral language. And today, John, I wanted to ask you about where the idea that you've come up with for this book, where did that come from?
Well, David, I guess commencing from recent times, I was up in my family's home country, up in Mossman, in an early, a childcare organisation, which is part of their brief.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, John. We're just having a bit of a bandwidth issue this morning, and your answer then just came through all garbled. I think you're okay now, but just briefly, can you were just saying you were up in your family country?
And I was talking to a sister of mine who works at an organisation involved in after school care and child care, and we were talking about culture and also the lack of resources and how everything that is presented to our younger generation is essentially in English. And so I asked her, did she think that if we took a story and that we developed a book, a children's book focused on the story, but done in mother tongue, and she thought that would be a good idea. And so from there, I had consultations with other family members up there, and then eventually I've had a number of I've had 2 sit-down meetings with elders up there to discuss the project thus far. Yeah. So it commenced from that conversation, and essentially the lack of language resources and stories available for our younger generation.
So, John, what's the status of the language in your country at the moment? Are there many fluent speakers using the language on a daily basis, or
well, the elders that I've spoken to in Mossman, and we're talking about Mossman specifically, there's perhaps several, a handful really, of fluent language speakers. There may be a couple of a generation behind them, but certainly no more than that.
Mm.
Now, if you go up to a place, Wujal, or Wujal, which is further north, and essentially, I guess, is the main hub of Kuku Yaral language today. There are a number of fluent speakers there, but to maintain a language, then we need to ensure that the next or younger generations are taking it on,
Mm.
and also learning the relationship of language to country, in country,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment. We went together to with the Woodville in one of our earlier trips for
Mhm.
Two Brothers Walking, and
Yes.
it struck me. It's such a beautiful place. Coming in, and you come in along the river or the dam, is it? And it's sort of like a Shangri-La. Really, you have to go round a corner and it sort of disappears, and you get a view of it across the water, and then you come round the other side, and um, uh, and in the town common area in the centre of the town, those huge mango trees. Remember those?
Mm.
Just absolutely massive mango trees with the seats underneath. And I sat down and
Yes, I do actually. Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
caught up with a family member
uh-huh.
um, sitting under that mango tree. Yeah.
Yes, and we were talking about uh, where I can't remember what time of the year we were there, but we were talking about I think it was a lack of mangoes that year, and
Hmm.
I said, oh, why is that? And he said, I don't remember the gentleman's name. He said, oh, we're going to have big storms this coming year, and
Yes.
so the uh, the what was happening with the mangoes uh, there, he was using to predict the climate for the coming season, which was still some months
Yeah.
away, and
Yes.
that was followed by those big cyclones that came through there
Yes.
on the following year. About I don't know 4 or 5 months later, something like that.
Yeah. 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 The 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 man's name was Beard,
Mr. Beard.
Baird, and he's a family relation. But I remember being told that from my mother's mother when I was quite young, and he was sitting down saying, "Oh, big cyclone's coming this year." I said, "How did you know that, Uncle?" He said, "No mangoes." Yeah.
Amazing,
So
isn't it?
I don't know if that's just the fury of the people or it's an actual phenomenon.
Yeah,
But no, it's an actual phenom natural phenomenon actually because it's
mm,
about reading country and
yeah,
looking at the signs and yeah.
yeah. And so it sort of shows that the old methods, the traditional methods of reading country, because
Hmm.
how those mangoes may have been there 80 or 100 years, they certainly lived to the area. Um,
People were suddenly told, well, you're not who you think you are. You do not belong in the place you think you are. And the only place you can go is uh, if you assume our language and our culture and our ways of living and our values. And we look at the destructive effect of doing that today is being manifested throughout many communities all over this country. Um, and what embedded and inherent in our stories and in our language is a way of rewiring that
mm,
and recreating or reconnecting, enforcing and reinvesting in those cultural values, beliefs, and practices that are encoded and embedded within those story places. and values that are about how you become human in this country, how you relate to people and country in within the environment that we share. And what we need, I think, to start to turn our heads to is about doing those things that create cultural stability with our younger generations,
Yes.
those values, those beliefs, those practices, ancestral values, beliefs, and practices that we need to start to reinvigorate in a very proactive way. And
Yes.
not only for our younger generation as Bama, but for all younger generations,
Yes.
because it's important that that we start instituting things that that create a way of living together that is harmonious, and again, not only with each other, but with our environment. So they're vitally important messages, and what I have found, even knowing a little bit of language, is that it starts to rewire how
Yes.
you think
Yes.
and how you view and how you relate to country,
Yes.
and of course to the stories embedded within the country. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
I just like to pick up what you're saying about the decolonisation and the effect of disconnection that happens as a result of that, because
mm,
we have a technologically advanced culture in the West that is actually very shallow in the sense that it is dependent on those things. And,
mm,
that's not to say there's anything wrong with that per se, but it does give us a blinkered vision. And the great inspiration that I've had from reading Lynn Kelly in The Memory Code, where she's talking about these things that really you've just been referring to, or the
mm,
technology of memory itself,
mm,
and the
mm,
effect of having language and story and country bring all brought in
mm,
together. The fact that you're talking about there of rewiring the brain is not metaphor. It's actually physical,
no,
something that's happening, and it changes
yes,
the way you think, and it changes
mm,
your perspective on things, and it broadens your horizons, and it gives you a greater grasp of the complexities and intricacies and interrelationships that
mm-hmm,
through the colonisation process.
mm,
That's the first thing that was broken down, and
mm-hmm,
because you can't control a society, that thinks for itself in its own way as an invader.
mm-hmm,
You need to do
mm,
something to deconstruct those mechanisms that are already there. There's nothing profound about that. That's the way it works. One of the things that gave me great hope in Kelly's writing is because she's developed a memory, not developed, but applied this memory system based on her the people that she's been talking with up in your country and further north, I think, and all over the place, as well as African and North American and so on. All these cultures are using not just country, but other memory aids as well. Of course,
mm,
we sort of know about message sticks and patterns on paintings and all those sorts of things that also
mm,
encode things that we're, as whitefellas, hardly ever aware of, but they are there.
mm, yeah,
The fact that to start using those takes no extra time. This is the thing
no,
that strikes me, is that it becomes just part of what you do. And it's the way that you apply your idle mind to remembering things. And I mean, we all got that sort of internal chatter going on all the time. And essentially, what she's saying is that what she's doing now with the memory code is using that downtime simply to, reinforce or put new information into, the song lines or the story lines or whatever you want to call them, um, uh, while you're in the shower, while you're, idle, while you're daydreaming, and it takes no extra effort, no extra time. It takes a bit of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and I think what she's saying is that in talking with Aboriginal people who have been using these systems, um, they're they generally are not aware of the fact that they're doing it because they've been trained to do it, and you just assume, well, that's what everyone does when you're brought up with that cultural attitude. And of course, you start talking to people about it, and you find out, well, actually, not everyone does. And in fact, Western culture wants to get you daydreaming about commercial stuff and what to buy next, and you know where status comes from in that respect, and your own personal ambitions and those sorts of things, disconnected from those of your community. And
Mm-hmm.
the simple act of having an integrated memory system changes the way that you see yourself in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and I'm going to put it into practice and test it this year, is that simply putting that into place is enough to um, give a much broader perspective, and changes the way you think in the most positive ways you can imagine, including the sense of connection with other people, and the connection with country, and the connection with culture and connectedness. I know you've been talking about decolonisation
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to me that reintroducing some of the aspects of um, an oral culture and a memory culture is one of the ways of doing that. And it may seem counterintuitive that we're doing that through creating an e-book, but yet that actually is part of what's driving it.
Oh yes, uh, for, for sure. I mean, if if the technology is there, then we need to use that for good and not evil.
Yes.
uh, uh, but that's where a lot of younger people are at. But
Mm.
the other thing that we promote, at First Peoples First, and we'd eventually like to support communities, financially in doing, is that the language program be done on country, and you're not only learning language, you're learning a song, or you're learning a dance, or you're learning how to make a spear or to start a fire. These are all tools, as you say, of connection. Once I go out and I write wood for a spear, and I'm sitting down and I'm doing all kinds of things, then I'm instantly connected. The environment that I'm in changes,
Yeah.
and it becomes something very focused, but something that we enter into an environment that is um, you're sitting with the ancestors,
Yes.
and so when I go into home country, I'm sitting by the gorge, or I'm walking down the road, I'm looking at that story. That's where I am, and that's where we go to recharge and regenerate and rejuvenate. And when we walk out of that, we're all a little bit more upright,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
for having done it. So all those cultural tools. I mean, we've been trying to introduce that for for many years, but it's within our cultural tools, and those things, our storytelling, our arts, our crafts, our dancing, etc. They're all, you can look at them and saying, oh, can't compartmentalize them, but they're all interrelated. They're all part of one big whole.
You remind me of the time we were shooting the How to Make a Spear segment. That went along with two brothers. We were up around the Port Augusta area. It had been very rainy, water everywhere in the sandy country, big puddles of water, and we were looking for a place to camp. And well, first of all, we were looking for the actual spear shafts, the culata, the blanks. Couldn't find anything, and so someone says, "Let's have a cup of tea." So we stopped and find a drier place. Everything was saturated, been wet, raining for 3 days. How are we going to light a fire? I thought, there's no chance. There's nothing dry around here. And so the first thing is, okay, being sent off to get some wood. Go, bring us some firewood. And so I go and bring some firewood. And I think, oh, this is a nice nuggety lump. This will last a while. This will make a nice blaze for it, if we can get it burning. And I bring it back, and the old man says, "No, not that. That's rubbish wood. It's too smoky." And I knew what smoky wood was like. It's very unpleasant to have a campfire from this particular wood. But these were all dry stumps. How could you tell what was what? I said, "Oh, okay. Well, which is the right one?" And he'd say, "Oh, you'll see." And I think, well, yeah, that's all very well, but I don't know what I'm looking for. And so you bring back another one, and by chance, eventually you'd happen to bring some good wood. I still don't know what the difference is when they're dry timbers, and then to go on and to watch this fire being built, where everything was absolutely wet. And so the other ingredient was to get green leaves off of a particular tree. And I think we did have an envelope or a piece of paper in the truck that we used to start with, and of course there was a cigarette lighter. So we didn't have to start from the spear thrower and the other stick. We didn't have to do friction to get that part of it going. But all the kindling was wet as well. Everything was wet, and I watched closely how that fire was being built. I'd never seen a fire being built like that before. And within minutes, that fire was blazing so high, I had to move. Everyone had to move back, and I had to move the truck because we were too close to it.
Yeah.
And so that knowledge is there, and that was totally invisible to me. In fact, not only was it invisible, I thought this was crazy to even attempt it, and yet within minutes I was proven yet again to have simply not known, not having the knowledge, and it was not a difficult thing to do. It just required the knowledge.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It's applied technology, applied physics, applied science.
Yeah.
How you create the air pockets within the building the fire structure, and where you place certain other elements above that sort of gets the flame reaching for it, and things like that. So it's highly scientific, and directly related to one's survival.
Totally. That memory for me is absolutely connected with that place. When I cannot think of that place without thinking of building a fire. I cannot think of how do you light a fire in the wet without that memory of that place being brought back to me. With it comes, if I start talking about it, I remember all those things about the learning about which wood is good for burning and which gives off such an acrid smoke that it's actually painful and harmful, probably.
It is, yeah.
To breathe in that smoke. So
Yeah.
all that is just tied up with having a cup of tea while we were looking for something, and to actually spell out the whole story, which I haven't here. I haven't gone into the details, which is all sitting there too in terms of how do you build a fire in the rain. Would take a couple of hours actually to go through all the details of that and what was happening at that time and what the kids were. And I have clear memories of what the kids were doing while we were making the fire. I can remember precisely the meal that we cooked there. That is all encoded into a space that is tiny, and that's accessible at any time. And when that memory comes back, and you say Kuku Yaral or something like that, with making fire in the rain. That's not actually the way you would say it. That's fire rain, but uh, uh, um, it releases an avalanche of all that knowledge and information in a very practical way. And that's really what we're talking about here in making a bilingual ebook, is to provide a foundation for those sorts of experiences, to create unforgettable cultural knowledge in one sitting. And it's not like you've got to go to school and do the theory, and then you've got to do the homework on it, and then you've got to do the exercises. You sit down and have your cup of tea, and you do it once, and it's there for a lifetime. An enormous amount of information, and that's a technology that we don't yet have available in our schools, for example. And when we tell kids stories, telling the stories is one thing, experiencing the story is another. But we start with telling the stories, and they have far more impact than reading these recorded stories that are written like fairy tales or bedtime stories off the page, and the difference with that and it becoming a living memory, which we're able to do in an ebook because of the extra material there and making use of the interviews and the experiences that take place during the drawing together of the telling of the story. It's still just the same story, but it's a rich and vibrant experience, that's forever associated with that. So that's where we're going with it.
Well, we trust it is, with the support and contributions of community. We're not government funded. We prefer to raise money through the community where we have opportunities such as this to express, verbally what it is we're about, and to and to trust that that we get people thinking about these ideas. It's really not about whether we can do it, however, in this instance it is, but it's whether people start to turn our heads towards that, and not only that, see the value and the importance of our languages, our way of life, our way of being, continuing.